This is a presentation on indicators 9 and 10. Indicator 9 covers the overall disproportionate representation of racial and ethnic groups identified as eligible for special education. Indicator 10 covers the disproportionate representation of racial and ethnic groups within specific disability categories. The weighted risk ratio. For example, how many times greater is a Hispanic student's risk of being identified as eligible for special education and related services for a specific learning disability, or SLD, in comparison with all other racial ethnic groups in the district? This slide shows the formula. A weighted risk ratio adjusts for district variability in the racial ethnic composition of the comparison group. Because the weighted formula accounts for variance in the size of ethnic groups in each district, it allows comparison of risk ratios across districts and allows the department to rank districts when deciding how to target technical assistance. The alternative risk ratio. This slide shows the formula for the alternative risk ratio. Or for example, how many times greater is a Hispanic student's risk of being identified as eligible for special education and related services for a specific learning disability, or SLD, in comparison with all other racial ethnic groups in the state? In comparison to the weighted risk ratio, an alternative risk ratio yields similar risk information, but because of the small size of the district's comparison group, it compares district risk against the risk for all other racial ethnic groups in the state. For indicators 9 and 10, indicator 9, districts are flagged for disproportionate representation if, for 3 consecutive years, the district exhibits a weighted or an alternative risk ratio of 3.0 or greater for possible overrepresentation. Indicator 10 districts are flagged for disproportionate representation in a specific disability category if, for 3 consecutive years, the district exhibits a weighted or alternative risk ratio of 4.0 or greater for possible overrepresentation. All districts flagged by way of this quantitative analysis are required to send policies, practices, and procedures, or PPPs, to the department. IDEA, or the Individuals with Disability Education Act, requires the department to determine whether the disproportionate representation is due to inappropriate identification of students for special education services by reviewing the district's PPPs, or policies, practices, and procedures regarding disability determination and eligibility determination. If it is determined that PPPs, or policies, practices, and procedures, are inappropriate and are contributing to the disproportionate representation, corrective action procedures are required. For the school year 21-22, all flagged districts are invited to participate in equity in special education, professional development, and technical assistance offered by the Special Education Office of Policy and Planning. The SPP APR measurement is the percent of districts with disproportionate representation of racial and ethnic groups in special education and related services that is a result of inappropriate identification. So indicator 9 measures the disproportionate representation of racial and ethnic groups in special education as calculated by a weighted or alternative risk ratio of 3.0 for 3 consecutive years, and a review of the appropriateness of a district's policies, procedures, and practices, or PPPs, for identifying students as disabled. For indicator 10, the disproportionality in specific disability categories, the SPP APR measurement is the percent of districts with disproportionate representation of racial and ethnic groups in special education categories that is the result of inappropriate identification. So disproportionate representation of racial and ethnic groups in specific disability categories as calculated by a weighted or alternative risk ratio of 4.0 for 2 years, and a review of the appropriateness of a district's policies, procedures, and practices, or PPPs, for identifying students as disabled.